Hi, welcome to another Tuesday Pulse. This is Chuck Boyce with CB Creative, and today we're going to talk about data. If I can go to the next slide here. So, here's a moment in the session. Somebody on your team asks an AI tool a question. Maybe it's, what's the client's balance? Maybe it's, summarize this account. Answer comes back fast, it comes back confident. But somebody else in the room says, that's not right. Think about this. Has this happened? Not the AI hallucinated something. I mean, the boring version about the number. Is it really right? What happened? Why is it there? Today is not about the AI being wrong. It's about why it's wrong and why it's almost never the AI itself. So, 2 sessions ago, talked about your team is already using AI tools that you don't know about. It's called the ownership gap. It was shadow AI. Nobody named actually is checking on the output. Last session, we talked about why AI pilots failed, the process illusion, automating a task that no one ever wrote down. So today, a little bit deeper, it's talking about the data. Even though you named an owner and you documented the process, none of it holds up if the data that's supporting it can't be trusted. So it's all about data trust. Where is your data coming from? And how authentic is it? So I want to walk through this session. This is an anonymized business called Coastal Leisure. 4 people, Dana and Marcus, run point on the clients, and there's 2 other accountants. Bookkeeping practice, 40 small business accounts, nothing exotic. You run a service business with client records. This is kind of similar to that type of business. So, client data lived in 3 different places. As you probably run a business yourself, or you know this, you probably use something like QuickBooks, but there's also a shared spreadsheet that Dana had built over years for exceptions and edge cases. And then whenever a client emailed directly, it lived mostly in Dana's email box. And so none of this looks broken. If you looked into it today, you would say, oh yeah, QuickBooks look good, and you wouldn't see any problem. It's invisible on the inside because mainly of those exceptions that Dana was keeping in her spreadsheet or her email and never updating the QuickBooks. So, uh, I don't know if you are familiar with Alignable, but there's a Smart Connect uh, mastermind within that excuse me, that a few weeks ago we talked about data. I was talking with Jeff Valen, who specializes in CRMs, and the topic was basically what does good data mean, even for AI? And so we discussed the importance of clean data, what it means, and there was a recurring theme or a trap that most businesses fall into. They check one thing and decide the data's fine, and then they stop looking. So today I'll give you some ideas and some info that you can use today, and I'll refer to them as the 5 dimensions of data with AI. So, first one, completeness. Everything that should be in the record actually there. It sounds obvious, and it never holds up once you check, because here's a quick check for yourself. If you pull a random sample of records right now, would every required field be filled in? Not every single record with every single field. It's one of those things that, depending on who entered it and what assumptions were made, there may be a missing field that AI would like to have. And without that completeness, there may be some discrepancies or some guesses that AI has to make because there isn't a complete record for complete data for every record. So at Coastal Ledger, about a third of the client records were missing required fields. Nobody caught it because nobody needed that specific field for day-to-day work. And so it just sat there empty. And when AI tried to summarize the account, it either skips it or it guesses, as I said, and it may guess because that's how LLMs work. Large language models are designed to work by analyzing what information it has, and if it doesn't have the right information, it fills it in. That's just the way large language models work. So here's how it actually, this check works. Not this week, not someday, but export a sample of your data and look for every required field and see what's blank. So export 50 records and identify which fields are actually required and see how many are not populated. And so the fix is straightforward. Once you know, name which fields are actually missing, assign somebody to backfill them, and then set a rule going forward. So that rule is a new record doesn't get saved as complete if a record required field is empty. And so that's really how the backfill may take some time depending on what you want to do. The important thing is going forward, you have a new rule that will prevent this from happening again. And so second one is accuracy. If it's not there, completeness is covered, but does it reflect? Well, a field can be full, but it can still be wrong. And so now you have to look through all of those records that are required, and does it really reflect reality? So here's dimension number 2 for Coastal Ledger. Somebody updates the QuickBooks, nobody updated the exception spreadsheet. And so Dana still checked that every time just out of habit. And so she didn't backfill QuickBooks because she had her trusted spreadsheet that she's used for years. And so depending on which system you asked, you had 2 different answers. And so which one was AI considering the authoritative answer? And if Dana thought that her exception spreadsheet was the authoritative, but AI thought that QuickBooks was, the authoritative answer is not being the true source of your data. It's relying on outdated QuickBooks. Dana had special edge cases on her desk that she didn't reflect back. And so here's a simple test again. Pull the samples, compare it against what your actual data source is, and don't say, does it look right? Does it match? So the fix isn't cleaning every record. It's picking one system as your source of truth and treating the others downstream as exceptions, not equals, but. In Coastal Ledger's answer was QuickBook wins, the spreadsheet gets updated from QuickBooks, not QuickBooks gets updated. So again, find your source of truth, your authoritative source, and make sure that everything flows down from that. The next one is consistency. If you have multiple people entering client information or something like that, are they using the same format? Do they use the same conventions across every system and every record? And so if you're using multiple sources of data, if you're using QuickBooks and you're using a spreadsheet, do you spell the client names the same? Do you use the same telephone number format? Do you skip an avenue versus street? If you have tons of records, you may run into say, using Atlanta, for example, they have Peach Street and Peach Avenue and Peach Boulevard. And so how do you keep the consistency within naming conventions? Make sure that, again, here we go. Marcus enters data one way, data enters it another, and then neither one's wrong. Individually, that's just the way they've always done it. The person reading the format understands it's fine, but AI is a little bit different. And so it's reading the same data set and it doesn't know how to determine which it is or to reconcile that they're the same thing. And so AI, again, is looking at it very literally. They have to match. Whereas a street versus an ST versus nothing mentioned, AI has to guess. And so, again, consistency across whichever records you're using AI to read from is very important. Again, the identify and fix is at pull 10 records entered by different people, not just your own, but look at if you're doing multiple sources and multiple people are entering data, compare the formatting side by side. You can usually spot this very quickly. Just pick one convention, write it down so everyone can see it, apply it forward. Don't go back and fix everything. It's just, again, document, identify, and use it going forward. Avoid the bleed in the future, and you may have time to fix some of the past records, but that is not as important as keeping consistency going forward. So another one, synchronicity. And this is where it gets interesting. Synchronicity is, do all of your systems agree with each other right now, today? Not whether they were accurate when they were first entered, but are they still in sync? So if you entered data into a spreadsheet 6 months ago and you entered into a different system today, are these systems in sync? And which one is, again, the authoritative source, the source of truth, and how does the one that's out of sync get updated? Is important that you have that synchronicity between all of your data sources. And this becomes important in the time of agents, because agents now are allowed to talk to multiple sources. And so you may be talking to your QuickBooks, you may be talking to your email, you may be talking to a spreadsheet or Notion or Slack or something like that. And so again, how do these systems stay in sync, and which is going to be the primary source, the truth of data? You have to build rules around that. And again, you don't have to go back and make sure that everything is currently in sync. It's just set your rules to make sure that going forward, that you have those rules in place, that if you are using multiple sources of data to feed an AI agent, that somewhere there is a source of synchronicity. So this morning, spreadsheet says one client is active. QuickBooks says that that client's on hold. Neither one is exactly wrong, but they're not up to date. And so the one that's in QuickBooks that says it's on hold, they're not aware that an email came in today that they balanced their ledger and now they're an active client. AI thinks that they're still on hold, even though they're not. And so again, something changed in one system, but it never made to another. Got to think about how these systems are connected to each other and which is going to be your source of truth. Pick one record, look it up in every system that your AI is going to be talking to on the same day. See if they agree. If they don't, you found the synchronicity problem. If it's probably simple, it's again one fix. Set the actual update cadence. Do you need this to be synchronized daily, weekly, monthly? Maybe it's just an annual thing. Maybe it's just when they do their taxes. You never know when, again, using the accounting. But someone should probably check is not really a fix. You need to specify the cadence and always specify a named owner who's going to be responsible for making sure this data is in sync if an AI agent is going to be reading that source of data. Last one, most owners haven't really framed it this way, is really something specific to AI. It's the context. Context, does the data carry what the AI needs to interpret it correctly? So it's not just the raw value, but if AI is making a decision, is it clean enough that it can interpret it correctly? So a client's flagged high risk at Coastal Ledger, again, looking at that. It's in the notes. The record itself is accurate, it's complete, it's consistent. Systems are in sync. Every check we made, it all passes. And the AI tool is pulling from that spreadsheet that never sees the flag because it's not in a column, it's in a note. And so the comment is sitting off to the side, and most tools don't read comments and they don't read certain cells unless you tell it to. And so the data can pass the accuracy and the concurrency and the synchronicity, but can it pass the context? And so that is a very important issue, thinking about how AI is going to interpret the data. Again, it's not really intelligent, it's just picking the best path forward, the best results possible. And so it's very hard to catch, and it's not something that most people will understand or know how to find. So ask what a human would actually need to know to interpret the record correctly. Check whether the AI tool you're using actually receives that, and whether it's sitting in a comment, a footnote, or just in someone's memory. I mean, before things were automated, if somebody has been doing their job for 20 years and they know that John Smith has always been a few weeks late, but it's never been documented, and they know that he always pays up, but does the AI understand that? And so anything that's critical, that's kept in a note or kept in memory or needs to be added to a structured field that AI can identify. This is a very difficult thing to fit context into it, because especially if you're an older business that has been doing business or operations manually or just by spreadsheets, semi-automated for a long time, AI doesn't understand that. AI needs very fixed instructions and rules. And so again, anything that you can identify that normally a human would know or be able to interpret, you have to let AI know that that is a specific rule, an instruction set. And so context becomes a very tricky point when you're working with agents or automation. Again, going back into what I always talk about is human in the loop. When you make a final move to send data to a contact or client or anything that's in a regulatory controlled environment, you need to have a human validate that final output before it goes out, because even a simple problem like a wrong price, a wrong address, a wrong phone number, something like that, that would be easily missed, or it could be picked up by a human, but AI doesn't care. It's working with the data that you have, and so it's always great to have an eye, a human eye, on the final output before it makes any potentially liable, reputational, some sort of impact to your business. Make sure that it's validated. So here's what this adds up to. There's a pattern, and the reason this exists is that I call it the data mirage. It's a belief that because your data exists, it's usable. Your data can pass the 4 checks and still fail on the 5th. And so it can be complete, it can be accurate, it can be consistent, it can be in sync. But is the context right? Any of 4 out of those 5 could be good, but the 5th one really makes the difference into how you can trust your output. So let's hear the actual cost here. Again, this is from a study from Massachusetts Institute of Technology, the Sloan Management Review. It was researched by Thomas Redman, published back in 2017. That sounds old, but these numbers haven't been updated recently, and so they haven't been updated since then that I could find. And so the cost of bad data runs 15 to 25% of revenue for most companies. This could be mid-sized businesses, but again, this is a range across a wide variety of companies. It's not small business specific, but just realize that this is an ongoing numbers that have existed since this study was done almost 10 years ago. Cost of bad data could be 15 to 25% of your revenue. Just keep that in mind about the importance of clean data, especially when it comes into when you introduce AI to the system. So this week, without turning this into a month-long project, just export a sample of your data. If you're using multiple sources, run each one against each other, check against the 5 checks we just have, and score it. and how many of the 5 actually pass. If it 4, you're great. If it starts doing 1 or 2, you have to pull back from automating, pull back from the AI, and make sure your data is clean, authoritative, in sync before you attach an automated system to it. So again, before you do this, make sure, is every required field populated for completeness, for accuracy? Does the sample match the source of truth? What is your source of truth? Has it been identified? And is it accurate for what AI is going to use it for? Is it consistent if you're using multiple, the consistency of multiple people are entering the data? Are they doing it in the same format? Are they using the same conventions? The synchronicity, if it's in multiple systems, are those formats, those conventions being kept in sync? What sort of automation are you using to keep these in sync? It doesn't need to be AI. It could be just something as simple as a make automation or a Zapier or something like that. If there's some automated process of trying to sync these systems, you need the same format, you need the accuracy, you need the completeness, and then last one is the context, is does AI see what humans know? And so if you have things in memory, habits, side notes, move those into areas that AI can reference to increase its usefulness and its accuracy. And so this can be a couple hours a week. It doesn't have to be a lot of time. For most businesses, especially if they're small, it doesn't take a lot of time, but it's worth 20 minutes each week of your time to make sure that your data is complete, accurate, consistent, in sync, and has the right context. So data can be perfect. That's not enough. Again, now your data can pass 5 of those checks perfectly. There's a second question, and it's separate from the data entirely. It's who's allowed to feed this into the AI tool, and what is the tool that's allowed to do it? And so now get back into one of those ownership ideas. It says access what's whitelisted for AI to pull from. You don't want it to read everything, not everything by default. It's what can be whitelisted by AI. And then, is the tool summarizing what it needs, or is it writing it back into your system? Reading is one thing and dealing with it, but is it taking that data and updating it in another source? And so what rules do you allow AI to have access to your data? Access, can it just read it? Great. If it can read and write and treat the data, then you have other rules. And now, when you start feeding it up into the vendor side, is it being used to train their model? Have you actually checked the terms and conditions of the vendor that's using this data? Do you have control of your data from the point of entering it into an AI to being able to understand where it's being stored, who has access at the vendor position, and can you roll it back? And who has ownership of that? Can you pull your data back at any time and make sure that they don't have copies of it anymore? Terms and conditions may not be enough to really find that out, but if you really are concerned about your data, and you should be if you're in a business and it's dealing with client information, proprietary rules, way your business operates, once AI gets it, it goes up into the cloud. Once it's in the cloud, who has access? What are they doing with it? How long is it being stored? Can you bring it back? There's a lot of questions that most businesses don't ask and they don't even consider, but it is a big issue when you get into AI, especially with any regulated, any proprietary, any client information. If it goes into an AI and it's being trained on, and suddenly that data gets used and its output, and the client is looking at an AI and they suddenly see their name and their numbers that the AI fed them, they're like, wow, where did this come from? And that could be a legal issue. It could be a regulatory issue. The fines are not small, and it doesn't matter if you are an entrepreneur, a 3-person business, or a 500-person business. The fines, if there's something wrong, are the same. A 500-person business can normally eat the fine. A entrepreneur or a 3-person business, it may wipe them out. So again, think about where your data is going when you introduce AI into it. So when AI touches your data, there's a record of what it touched. Is there a record? And what has changed? Is there a named person? Not saying accounting and not saying management. It's a named person that can be the point of contact that says that if there's a data failure, that this person knows what to do, knows how to respond, can bring it back. And so, again, if you don't have a named owner, you are running into potential problems. Again, you can answer that question. Is your data good? And it may be in one of those 5 questions, there's 5 answers, but if you walk through them, all of it, is it good with all 5 of those areas? So back to Coastal Ledger, to close this out. The actual step wasn't rebuild everything. It's picking one client record, running through all 5 checks, fixing what's broken, writing the rules so it doesn't drift back, and that's it. Simplify. Don't go back 5 years and try to update everything. Find out where the biggest problems were, write rules around how to make sure it doesn't happen, and use those going forward. That's the biggest thing, is going forward, is to not repeat the past mistakes. And so if you want to read on where your data is, I have a website, governance@cbcreative.com, runs you through. It's a free 3-minute check. Just ask some of these questions and see how comfortable you are with where your data is. If you want to actually contact me, you can go to cbcreative.com/contact, set up a 15-minute call, and we can talk about where you are and where you stand, what may need to be done. Outside of that, if your data isn't broken because nobody's careful, it's broken because nobody's checked it against all 5 of those things. You may think your data is good. It probably isn't, but it's fixable. And it's cheaper to fix before AI touches it, and before you run into any of these problems that may be introduced with AI, because, again, it only deals with what's available to it, what it's been trained to do, what it's been trained not to do, and there should be an owner, a final say, before the data goes out into the public.